Welcome to another episode of Data Tech Talk. Today we have a very special guest with us. He's the CEO of Soda. His name is Maarten Mechelen. Hi, welcome to the show, Maarten.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to start off with a little bit of background from yourself. So please tell us a little bit about your professional journey, how you came to found Soda, basically.
Right. So straight out of school, I joined this company called Collibra, which was back in 2011. So that was very early days of that company. And we're kind of the first ones in the larger space that were positioning a solution to chief data officers. But I jokingly often say, well, they were positioning something to chief data officers before they existed. They were a very new role back then. And it was a kind of very interesting learning experience because that was my kind of first real life experience with information and data management. I studied about it, of course, but that was kind of my first real kind of exposure into companies that were setting that up. And that evolved. I did a variety of functions there. Was involved in parts of the go-to-market, parts of product, parts of like customer success and implementations. And after I think 6-7 years there, I moved on and basically started Soda with my co-founder Tom. And we're focusing on data monitoring and data performance.
Why Soda?
As in the name?
Yes.
All right, it's interesting, right? When you're doing these exercises, like how are we going to name the company? It was one of the things that stuck, and it came from this idea of we wanted to be proactive in terms of like what the software does. It needs to be kind of bubbling up information about what's happening in your data warehouse, data lake, and it needed to be kind of conversational. So bubbling up, right? And that's why we added the dots and kind of vertically, and then the horizontal dots were more about the communication. Like when somebody's chatting with you, you see the 3 dots, they're saying something. Well, that was kind of the idea behind it. And yeah, it stuck. So we kept using it. We later acquired soda.io, and here we are.
Very interesting. Not a lot of people talk about, how they formed the company name. So thanks for that. And I'm very interested to know a little bit about basically, the core basically use cases that you cater to, Soda, as well as the core industries that you cater to as well.
Right. So if we zoom out a bit, right, what are some of the key trends in data analytics? Well, I think overall the importance, of course, has increased because businesses, they're automating their processes with data, and that's they're doing that more and more. Sorry, and at an increased pace. And there's kind of enabling, of course, on the one side, there's technology enabling that. So the advent or the rise of the cloud data platform, I think, is big. So companies are really rebuilding a lot of their old tech that they had in data and analytics, and they're basically building that for the clouds. Even the largest organizations out there that were traditionally kind of the heaviest consumers of, for example, a Teradata data warehouse that we had so many years ago, all of those companies are moving to the clouds. So it's a very interesting time because the technology is also driving organizational change. Right? We're much more, when it comes to data analytics, we're much more integrated now in cross-functional teams with diverse skill sets. And we really have an opportunity to change the culture in data analytics right now. That new technology is kind of giving us a point in time that allows us to rethink and embed good practices from day one. So I think key trends is really automation enabled by technology, and then of course a big opportunity within the organizational aspect of this.
Yeah, and in terms of some of the key capabilities that you see in terms of the use cases, in the industries, what are the key capabilities? Like what about this whole data management landscape is Soda addressing very clearly?
Right. I think so. We've talked a little bit about the DNA more of how we think about what we do. So it's about driving culture change, right? It's about transparency. It's about enabling individuals and data teams to be self-service, to do the right thing with data, and it's about collaboration. But if you then look at that's kind of a common theme across all of data management, right? I think essentials of data management, I kind of split them up in three kind of major buckets. One is more on the discovery side, where it's more about searching and finding data sets or relevant data sets or data sets that are often used, about sharing data with others, kind of about classifying and organizing your data. That I see more on is more of a kind of the cataloging markets right now, and there's a lot of kind of commercial and open source companies in there. And then you have a kind of a second area, which is a lot more about data protection and auditability, privacy, security, making sure that once we actually get access to data for a certain purpose, that we can kind of make sure that that happens in a secure way, right? That you get access to maybe a redacted set of or redacted data sets, or that some form of obfuscation is used. That's kind of all adjacent to us. What we focus on is basically on whether data is performing for the different teams, which is pretty much the ability to kind of instrument and capture a lot of information about your data sets, looking at that information over time in the context of monitoring or monitors. And then whenever certain thresholds or kind of anomalies are detected, that there's an investigative process. That's kind of the area that we focus on. So we help teams collaboratively define what good data is, making sure there's transparency around key events like structural changes to the data, make sure the relevant teams get them, that they can investigate, analyze, and that becomes a continuous process. That's really what we focus on.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just in terms of understanding, the general landscape in terms of, let's say, overall data quality, or whenever people are trying to profile large data sets, what are the biggest challenges that you see these companies facing, if you had to name one?
The biggest challenge that they're facing, I think it's the biggest challenge really is communication. It's about things kind of upstream, which could be either within your landscape. For example, you have a product team, they've built an application, and they're a producer of data, like event data, what are users doing there. And then there's maybe some external data that you have. There's maybe some more kind of finance and sales oriented data sets. And you have on the back of those, you have all of these data product builders. People are automating with data. And I think the biggest kind of challenge that companies are facing now is the structure of those data sets kind of are evolving over time as the business is evolving. And some of that is external to your organization, some of that you basically cannot impact, and others you can. But there's downstream dependencies and expectations on data. So the alignment of that and the creation of transparency when changes happen that have a downstream impact is, I think, one of the key kind of challenges that companies are facing right now.
Yeah. If Gartner had to describe Soda today, for example, where would they place it under?
Well, this is an active discussion with them. So pretty much, I think they're currently thinking of it, and there's a variety of teams that maybe have a different opinion as well within Gartner, Forrester, and others. They see it as kind of, it's an evolution of what they previously described as data quality management, as a part of data governance, kind of within their data management capabilities. They sometimes call it more like agile or collaborative or more automated in terms of like through machine learning, but it's not really covering the full spectrum of it. Forrester, on the other hand, calls it data performance, and that's something that we align much more to. Data performance is kind of, it's very different to how we've traditionally defined things like data quality. It focuses much more on the organizational side of it. And I think that's yeah, that's what we align with best.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree to how you described it. But I'm also wondering about your journey. So where are you in the entire journey? Where do you believe you are in the entire journey?
Right. So we've been at this for 2.5 years. Time is really flying. And you know, where we currently are, if you're building pure software products, where basically we have a couple of production deployments now with customers that we're working very actively with, and the core focus there is really making sure it works for them and it's growing within the organization. But we have conversations with so many companies that are looking for capabilities. Some companies are just a couple of hundred people, technology companies. Other companies are 50, 60,000 people. So their requirements kind of shift over time as their organizations grow in complexity and they have different teams responsible for more granular things. So I think you could still call, like in our life cycle, we're still really figuring out a company with these characteristics. That's typically what they need in terms of our capabilities. So we're still in that phase, and we're still kind of very quickly and iteratively developing new product features for each of those kind of customer segments. And that's in preparation of, sorry, that's in preparation of kind of a larger launch that we'll do of the product when we feel like we have a really kind of strong value proposition to companies of each of these sizes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm also wondering in this case, like the bigger enterprises out there, they're actually more used to the, let's say, the bigger names or the bigger competition in the competition landscape, let's say.
Right.
How 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 does soda fall in this landscape? So how do you differentiate between the more traditional, I would say, companies which fall under data quality, let's say, or data profiling and collaboration and so on?
It's very interesting. When we started this journey, I thought like we will be in so many conversations with these with teams that are also evaluating these vendors. But it happens that we're actually never coming across, we're never meeting them in like the competitive landscape, which I found very interesting. I think it's mostly because modern data teams, as they're rebuilding their new stack, they realize that some of the larger vendors in this space, their technology is not able to keep up with that fast-paced change. So basically they miss out on the opportunity to fundamentally change how teams work and collaborate. Right? Imagine you have a data team that's building, for example, their data warehouse on Snowflake, that are using dbt for their data transformations, and are using something like a prefect, for example, for data ingestion and kind of pipeline orchestration. How do you embed a legacy kind of provider in that kind of process, enabling at the same time as technology changes or your kind of data infrastructure changes that your business is immediately kind of aligned? That's something where they're kind of not helping, and that's why we don't come across them that often. But we do see, on the other hand, that a lot of data management capabilities are being more and more commoditized. So there's a lot more smaller vendors that are all focusing on this space. So I think we have a very, very interesting time ahead.
Yeah, and I believe that you'll, hopefully be in that stage to not only, let's say, expand on these different kind of capabilities that you already mentioned very soon. But in this time, this whole year has been pretty crazy for all of us. And I'm also wondering, and I'm asking this question kind of like to everyone, like how is COVID impacting the kind of projects that's coming through, or do you see an increase in understanding about more about your data, or what kind of interesting things are you looking at
Yep.
because of the COVID impact?
Very interesting times indeed. I think initially when it hit, you saw that companies were Some industries obviously were way more impacted than others. And in some industries that shock was like, we have a full freeze of budgets, but quickly that kind of changed. Companies know that, and organizations in general know that right now, we need to even be better with data. We are a lot less kind of physically connected. And that means that there's a lot of information that we typically are able to share in kind of face-to-face sessions. That information is being lost, right? And then we have to compensate for that, and we have to organize for that. Data plays a role in it, but it's definitely not the only thing, right? You have to structurally think about how we organize our organizations, how we create a work environment that we can efficiently share information, right? That's also flexible, that's safe. I think those are key things that COVID has kind of forced us to think about really structurally and fundamentally. So in general, the impact on the business, I think, is relatively small, but organizationally, at least our business, right? But organizationally, I think the impact for everyone is quite big.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's pretty much aligned to what most of the thought leaders have said in the past interviews as well. Especially, you're coming from the vendor side, and most of my previous interviewees were from, the let's say the customer side. Or the consumer side, and they did mention very similar things, that the projects were put on hold temporarily, but soon after, because everyone was working online, they had to turn it back on and kind of readjust to the new normal of working online, of gathering data online, of making sure that even the simple acts of person-to-person transfer of paperwork is now fully automated, and that calls for making sure that the data is trusted, and the reports that you're holding in front of you are actually valid, for example. So yeah, I totally agree, but I don't like ending interviews on sad notes. So what I want really
Agreed.
for you to really share with us, maybe in your overall journey with Soda so far, a memorable experience or a memorable moment that you had, something to be proud of, or something funny.
Oh, interesting. Well, I am inclined to maybe not. It's not a sad one. I think in a way it's somewhat funny and interesting, and it's kind of more of a reality of what's currently going on. It's back in the early times when we were starting off the company. We were doing a lot of, of course, and still are doing a lot of kind of meetings with data teams, figuring out what their key challenges are, etc. And it was back in I think early 19 that we went to London to meet up with a large technology company to talk about the solution, and we were really flabbergasted by kind of the level of awareness and proactiveness in the space of like monitoring and making sure the data that you use in your downstream data products is really working for you. Much so that there was this company was talking about, we had this issue. So we have this machine learning model that for like a couple of weeks we couldn't figure out what was going on. Like it was making these predictions that were entirely off. We had to shut it down. We put an entire team on it to start analyzing it. And a couple of weeks later, we figured out that one of our data providers, which was a subsidiary of them, they were sending data, but it was stale data. It was not refreshing. And we were so flabbergasted because we were thinking about this problem already for quite some time, and we were thinking, well, most organizations will have some basics in place, but that was actually not the case. So I don't know, maybe that's not ending on a very positive note, but I thought that was very kind of a reality check at some point. Like, we have a lot of work to do in data management, and the more we start relying on data, I think the more we need to start thinking about how we make sure that that it's really working for us, right? And that there's not like major gaps in data that lead us to do the wrong things in our day-to-day. So yeah, maybe that is ending on a positive note. There's a lot of work to be done, and we know what to do. So that's actually good news, I think.
More work for you and the soda team.
Also, yes, more work for us, but we're not the only ones working on this. Many teams, I think, and globally are spending time and effort on this. So it's, I think it's really good to have seen that increase in awareness also in the last 3 to 6 months. Has been very interesting as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maarten, for being on the Data Tech Talk series. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and with that note, I want to end this episode, but just so you know, I'll be posting Maarten's link as well as the soda link in the comments section or in the description of the video, and hopefully see you next time. Bye.
Cheers.